We believe that computer science has many possible benefits. However, we also believe that structural injustices exist in society and technology, and that being a good coder means understanding social contexts and the civic responsibility of coders to work toward more just futures. The aim of this work is to call attention to the dangers, harms, and downsides of CS as it is currently taught, end quote. From page 2. And that is a really important thing to consider. I've noticed a tendency with some educators who are very passionate about whatever subject area or domain they are teaching, that some educators only present it within a positive light. And a lot of the discourse around computer science education is like, hey, here are all these unmet jobs. Hey, here's a way that you can get out of poverty by learning some concepts and practices. Or hey, computer science allows you to express yourself, or computational thinking can be used with everything, even though I disagree with that, etc. So it's all these like positive, like, look at all this great things that computer science can do. And while yes, that is good to consider and good to promote and is great for advocacy work, we also as a field really need to kind of sit down and grapple with some of the problems with computer science education. So one of the larger problems that I really appreciate that the authors mention in here is the neoliberal influence on computer science education. So here's a quote from page 2. Quote, "The focus on broadening participation in computer science is often driven by economics and the need for enough people with computing knowledge to meet the demand for computing jobs. The predominant discourse maintains that women and people of color have been shut out of a prestigious and economically impactful career path, one that might lead to financial success and a life-changing shift in socioeconomic status. Researchers often hypothesize the causes of underrepresentation in STEM careers were due to a leaky pipeline and lack of access to STEM education. In response to this criticism, government, industry, and nonprofit organizations have spent millions of dollars with the aim to increase representation within CS and the CS pipeline," end quote. And a little bit further down, quote, "However, we also see the above pipeline argument as grounded in a problematic assumption, that a career in CS is fundamentally good, and perhaps is also a way out of poverty. All of these intersecting assumptions are tinged with the deficit notions of systemically minoritized groups, an overly opportunistic approach to structural racism, and patriarchy within the field of CS, and neoliberal notions of production and wealth," end quote. Both those quotes are from page 2. So the authors go on to say that we often are measuring growth in the field, like specifically in the K-12 area, by looking at AP classes to see, are the elementary and middle school efforts increasing the numbers of students who are enrolled in AP computer science courses at the high school level. And then we also look at, of the students who are enrolled, what are the pass rates within different demographics and whatnot. But the authors argue that looking at computer science from this lens does not consider the systemic barriers that different groups of people face. Instead, quote, "It perpetuates the meritocracy myth in computer science that suggests that access and hard work will lead to success. In reality, the opportunities within computer science are racialized and gendered in ways that the social, economic, and political structures make it possible for some to succeed over others. This leads us to wonder whether the measures of success are flawed, whether the pedagogies of CS are insufficient to teach Black and Brown students, and whether these traditional measures reinforce structural problems within computer science. We certainly believe that increasing representation and success of Black and Brown students is one aspect of equity-focused computer science education. However, we cannot address anti-Blackness by simply increasing representation in computing, given that anti-Blackness is no glitch, and the system is accurately rigged. We need to go beyond broadening participation to tackle the design and deployment of technologies that disproportionately impact Black and Brown communities and reproduce white supremacy, heteronormativity, patriarchy, and settler colonialism," end quote. It's from page 2. This reminds me a lot of the paper that I unpacked by Scott and Elliott, so I'll include a link to it in the show notes. It was titled "STEM Diversity and Inclusion Efforts for Women of Color, a Critique of the New Labor System." And in that particular paper, they use sharecropping as a metaphor for critiquing basically neoliberalism in STEM and CS education, and how we are setting up people for failure in jobs by saying, hey, you can get more money and you can do this great thing. And then they go into these jobs and there's sexism, racism, homophobia, etc., perpetuated within the cultures within different organizations, corporations that employ computer scientists and programmers. So Elliot and Scott are arguing, hey, we need to not just send people into these problematic workplaces, we also, as a field, need to talk about the problems in these workspaces and improve them. So the way that I kind of read Aman and Marie's paper is, so it's like a yes and. So the authors are arguing, hey, we need to fix these issues in industry and in the field And we also need to talk about some of the problems in the K-12 space, which I really appreciate that they have such a critical lens and are willing to look at something that they are clearly passionate about and problematize it. Because there are some wonderful things with computer science, but there's also some things that are like, hey, we can't sweep this under the rug. We really need to sit down and talk about this. In particular, quote, we need to bring criticality to computer science education that challenges the way design and deployment of technologies harm and oppress communities of color and examine the role computer science plays in that, end quote. It's from page 3. So because the authors posit that curriculum should examine the role of oppression and bias and harm in CS, they ask questions like, quote, what does this look like at a K-12 level? How does the field bring critical computer science to K-12 classrooms that challenges colorblind racism and center communities where students live? End quote, from page 3. And those are some excellent questions. This excerpt of the CSK8 podcast is from episode number 132, which is titled Breaking the Code, Confronting Racism in Computer Science Through Community, Criticality, and Citizenship.